What's up, everybody? And today we're checking out something that I've been hesitant to check out, but I also feel like it's probably something that I should acknowledge, and that is whether the British military is in a position to be able to fight a war if a war is needed. The video we're going to watch is called "Is the British Military Ready for a Major War?" and it's by War-O-Graphics. I will leave a link down below to the original video. It's a 23 minute video. We're going to watch it, but obviously as someone who was in the British Royal Marines Commandos, I'm definitely going to have an opinion on this, and I'm going to be talking quite a bit in this video. So if you want to watch the video without me waffling, I'll leave a link down below. But other than that, let's watch this. Let's have some fun. Oh, before we get started, I've got a long-term sponsor on the channel. You guys know I don't really do sponsors on this channel all that much, but this one's a good one. Chugg. CHUUG, built in Britain. Now, I don't have a link yet. The link will be ready soon, but I'll just put like the socials for Chugg down below. If you want to know what it is, check this out. You know how much I drink water on this channel when I'm watching my videos. This is Chugg. Look at this. How sick is this? It's a full-on mug. It's even got my initials on it. Isn't that incredible? Absolutely amazing. So thank you, Chugg, for being a new long-term sponsor of the channel. I'm very excited. They come in these nice fancy bags. He sent me two. I've got that one and I've got this other one. I'll show you this one in the next video. But yeah, other than that, let's shut up. Let's watch this and let's see if the UK military is adequate enough if a war kicked off.
On paper, it's one of the world's great military powers, a country that possesses not just nuclear weapons, but also a navy capable of deploying globally and special forces that can stand shoulder to shoulder with any of their peers. Where military funding is concerned,
I do want to preface this because he did mention it there. The soldiers that Britain does produce are some of the best in the world. Like, without a doubt. Without a doubt. The Royal Marines that I was with, phenomenal. Some of the best soldiers in the world, and the special forces are amazing. And so it's not necessarily are the soldiers good enough as it is more equipment and numbers.
Britain likewise shines. The second highest spender in NATO after the United States, it's also the sixth highest military spender in the world. Nor does it shy away from using that power. It was the UK that led the initial charge to help arm Ukraine. The UK that today works alongside America to protect Red Sea shipping from Houthi attacks. Yet despite all these positives, there are growing worries about the state of Britain's armed forces. Worries that the UK may no longer be capable of fighting, let alone winning, a major war. Since 2023, a number of generals, both British and American, have been raising the alarm about the UK's military preparedness.
It's true. I don't think the UK is currently adapted for war. Now, there is this thing by, I think it's 20... Oh, when is it? What year is it that they want to double the military force? And they've got a bunch of kind of quotas that they're trying to reach. God, what's the year? Let's see if I can find it. 2027 is the year, which isn't far away. It's only like 2 years away, pretty much.
Warning that kit is outdated, branches are understaffed, and money is being wasted on botched projects. Warning too that without major change, Britain risks sleepwalking into a military catastrophe.
Yep. War-O-Graphics. I've never watched this channel before. This should be interesting.
Two months. That's how long the Defence Committee in Britain's House of Commons recently estimated the nation's military could stand in a peer-to-peer conflict. 2 months before stockpiles ran dry, the military exhausted its capabilities, and the country simply became incapable of fighting any longer.
Jeez.
For many, the report came as a nasty shock. After all, the UK is a nation that spends over £50 billion annually on defence. That's about...
Where's it all going then? Where is it possibly all going? Because that is ridiculous.
Of the 2% NATO guideline. The British RAF, Royal Navy, and SAS are famous around the world for being so good at what they do. But for those who'd been following the hollowing out of Britain's armed forces, The report was not a surprise, rather it confirmed what they'd been saying for years. In some cases, those who'd been trying to alert the British government came from across the pond. In 2022, a senior US general told the then Secretary of State for Defense, Ben Wallace, that Britain was barely a Tier 2 power. In the jargon, Tier 1 is a military that has not only a nuclear deterrent, but also the ability to deploy its navy, army, and air force globally at short notice. While London is under no illusions that it could match a high-level Tier 1 power like the United States, it's key to Britain's self-image that it at least belongs in this hallowed club. So,
yes, I think that also Britain has this tendency to think that we're bigger than we actually are. And I think that goes along with, if you think about World War I and II, it was very much everyone bands together and gets the job done. But it doesn't mean that our military was ready for the war straight away. It took everyone banding together. And I think that's what would be the case right now, to be honest with you.
To get such a brutal reality check from an ally certainly stung.
Yeah.
And the worst part? The American general was almost certainly right. In a detailed piece on the comments, The Economist noted how Britain's military today lacks, quote, long-range missiles and electronic warfare assets, and that there are concerns within the army that it lacks adequate intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities, and that it does not have enough artillery.
What's it doing with that money then?
Telegraph adds that Britain is also majorly lacking in layered air defense, the ability to fight off attacks at both short, mid, and long range. Such holes in credibility are not unique among European militaries. Although it's now trying to rearm, Germany currently lacks key capabilities. Other peer nations have run their artillery supplies down, giving shells to Ukraine. But Britain represents an unusual case among larger, wealthier nations in that its problems are compounded by an acute lack of manpower. According to the UK Ministry of Defence, the entire British military, including reservists and volunteers, currently numbers 184,865 personnel. Now that sounds like a big number, but in reality it is the lowest staffing point since the Napoleonic Wars, where the army is...
Holy... It is. No one wants to join anymore. No one wants to join the military. And I get it. Like, I was in the Royal Marines Commandos at the age of 16, right? And a part of that was the fact that my dad was in the military. And we had a lot of respect for the military. But like, oh God, this is quite a rant, isn't it? But like, the military messed me up and then didn't look after me, right? And I think with the rise of social media, you're seeing more and more of that online all the time. Like people saying, look, the military, you know, although it did some good for me, it really messed me up. And they didn't care when I left. And they don't look after you. And so they're turning around and be like, why is nobody joining? And yet they're not addressing the fact that they don't care about the people joining. Do you get what I'm saying? And I just think it's a recipe for disaster. There's no patriotism anymore because it feels like respect is a two-way thing, right? People demand respect, but you can't get respect by demanding it. You get respect by earning it, right? It's a two-way system. And for people to respect the British military and want to join the military, they have to be respected back and looked after back, and they're not. The government doesn't care for the average person in the UK anymore. It doesn't. Or at least they say they do, and they're not showing it, or there's certain people that do, but they don't ultimately put in the effort, right? And so what desire as a young person today got to go and put their life on the line for a country that doesn't really care about them anymore? That's the truth of it. Would I like it to be different, where the country really does take care of you and we really do like have patience? Of course I'd love that. Of course I would. The NHS is fantastic, but you can't deny that the NHS right now is struggling. If you want to get an appointment with the NHS, you've got to call on the dot at 8 o'clock. If you don't call on the dot at 8 o'clock, you might, even if you do call then, you might be 10th in line not to get an appointment, right? This is the shock I've had since coming back to this country after living in the US. And I had this picture of what it was like when I left 10 years ago. I left in 2015, right? And the UK was so different then. And I had this image in my head of what the UK was. And then we moved back to the UK, and it's a shadow of what it was. It's nowhere near what it was. Doesn't mean that I don't want it to be. Of course, I'll fight for it to be the country it used to be. But I'm not going to tell my son to join the military because my experience in the military was they messed me up big time. And not only did they not help me, they told me there was nothing wrong with me. And so how does that like trickle down the line? I'm telling my son that. I'm saying, look, like the military messed me up and they didn't take care of me. So his first impression of the military is they don't really care about you. Whereas as back in the day when my dad was in the military, my dad was blown up in the Falklands War. And my dad turned around and said, oh, the military is one of the best things you do. Because they actually took care of him. They looked after him. To some extent. Not as much as they should have, but to some extent. Now, I didn't even do a fraction of what my dad did, right? But I was severely depressed. Badly depressed. And they straight up said to my face that I didn't have depression. And so there's only so many times the military can do that to a generation before their kids just don't want to do it anymore because they've seen how much it messes their dad up or their mum up. And so that's why we've got no one joining. No one's patriotic anymore because the country doesn't fight for you. That's just the way it is. If the country can turn that around, more people will join.
Is concerned, things are even worse. With just 72,500 people, The Guardian reports that the British Army is currently smaller than it's been for 300 years. Now, we'll get on to the causes of what's been called the military's recruitment crisis in a later chapter. For now, we simply want to highlight that it's not only people that the UK is lacking. In services like the Royal Air Force, the number of fast jet squadrons has dropped from 31 at the end of the Cold War to barely 7 today. The Navy, meanwhile, struggles to put together enough support ships to accompany its 2 new aircraft carriers. And this is a huge problem, and it's not just a problem for those living in the land of tea and drizzle. Right now, Britain is meant to be one of 2 serious military powers in Europe, the other one being France. If Britain is really a paper tiger, then it bodes extremely ill for the continent.
Yeah.
Intelligence services are warning that Vladimir Putin may follow on from his invasion of Ukraine by attacking one of the Baltic states within 3 to 5 years. If the US by then is sinking into isolationism and refuses to help, it'll be up to London and Paris to do the heavy lifting. As it stands,
I do still think, even in this current situation, that Europe could easily defeat Russia. I still think, in this current position, I think we could. Because Europe as a whole, when the shit hits the fan, they'll get the work done. They will. They will. And that's just the way Europe, that's how it's always been. That's how it's always been. But it doesn't mean we should rest on our laurels now.
Though the UK simply won't be up to the job. The good news is that we have a pretty good idea of how things got here. How it is that a once revered military power has fallen to such a low ebb. The only question now is, can Britain turn things around?
Money issue. The money issue.
Given that it's the world's 6th largest economy, you might assume that Britain doesn't suffer from money worries. I mean, this is a country that spends 2.3% of its GDP on defense each year. In raw dollars, that's the 2nd highest amount in NATO. And yet, problems persist. So,
yeah.
What gives? Well, one thing is to note that even
because we spend money on useless shit that we don't need to spend money on. And that money that we spend useless shit on is usually from the taxpayers, and the money that the taxpayers are spending doesn't get put back into making their lives any better.
2.3% of GDP is far, far less than Britain was spending during the Cold War. In the 1970s and 80s, the figure was over 4%. That is a huge shortfall, one that admittedly the government recognizes. Just recently it was announced that defense spending would be hiked to 2.5%, quote, as circumstances allow. The trouble is, that's an extremely vague phrase, one that seems more likely to be used as an excuse for missing targets than as an aspirational figure to aim for. As the Financial Times writes, with the tax burden at a post-war high and public services under huge strain, there is no easy answer to where to find the resources. Still, while an increase in defense spending would be welcome, there's no guarantee that it would fix things. Especially since the bigger problem may not be the funds themselves, but the way the Ministry of Defence spends them. The UK's military procurement process is inefficient, swamped in bureaucracy, and infested with optimism bias. House of Commons report last year declared it is well and truly broken. Aside from drought...
But you see this all the time, though. You see them spending billions of pounds on things that aren't necessarily helping the people. And again, when we're paying the amount of tax we are paying, and it's not directly helping the people who are paying the tax, there's going to be less patriotism. And not only is the money going to be lacking in the military, but the patriotism is going to be lowered. And people are not going to want to join the military. And it's this big circle of the government messing over the people. And therefore, people don't want to join. People don't want to put the effort in.
The military and red tape, the procurement process is plagued by oddities like an inability to buy off-the-shelf kit, a problem best typified by the Ajax scandal. Intended to be the next generation of British armoured fighting vehicle, the Ajax project began in 2010 with a simple idea. By basing the new vehicle on a pre-existing platform developed jointly by Spain and Austria, the UK would cut down on the cost and hassle of commissioning a brand new system. Now, for many militaries, buying off-the-shelf kit is standard. Poland, for example, is currently transforming itself into a regional power by buying hundreds of American HIMARS launchers and scores of South Korean tanks. In the case of Ajax, though, the MOD kept adding new requirements until more than 1,200 modifications were required for each vehicle. As The Economist notes, at this point, quote, it was essentially bespoke. It was also unbelievably expensive. Due to come into operation in 2018, Ajax has since ballooned to a cost of £5.5 billion and has yet to be delivered. One major issue has been the development of noise problems so bad that they injure crew, all thanks to the endless modifications that the MOD insisted on. Nor is Ajax alone in going hugely over schedule and over budget. The Morpheus battlefield communications system was supposed to be entering operation in 2025. Instead, the UK cancelled that contract in December, already having spent nearly £700 million over 7 years. And these are just two examples. But they are very representative of a deeper issue with the system. A system that encourages officials to sign off on expensive kit that can't possibly be brought in on time and on budget. It is a system that clearly needs an overhaul. However, waste is not the only reason Britain is getting less for its money than you might expect.
It just shows how badly the country has been ran for the past 10 years, doesn't it? It's just, the cracks are showing big time. Big time. It's not even 10 years. It's like 15, 20 years in it. The country has just dipped so much. It's crazy. Now, I'm in a very privileged position where I'm a citizen of two countries, right? And as much as a patriot as I am, I got that green lid right behind me here, right? I love the UK. The UK is my home. It always will be. It is an amazing place. But if there's ever danger here, my biggest priority is my kids. And what will I do if the country goes to war and my kids are in danger and I'm able to put them in a safer place? That's the difference. I guarantee 99% of the population of the UK, if the UK went to war, they would feel like they wanted to jump ship. I guarantee it. And some people will criticize me for that. They'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe you would just ditch, blah, 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 blah. I've got kids. Mate, I've got kids. You know what I mean? At least I'd send my wife and kids away if I couldn't leave. I'd send them away to the US and protect them, right? But I tell you what, like, the majority of people will be disappearing. Do you know what I mean? People will be getting injuries, bone spurs, all sorts of stuff to avoid joining. I guarantee that right now. It just breaks me heart. This country's just...
There's also the issue of the UK's nuclear weapons. One of only two nuclear powers in Europe, Britain is committed to maintaining its deterrent, a move that may turn out to be extremely wise if the US ever pulls out of NATO. Unfortunately, nuclear capabilities are not cheap. So much of British defence spending goes on the deterrent that it's been estimated the military budget minus these costs is actually closer to 1.75% of GDP. That means the Army, Navy, and RAF are being forced to get by on restricted budgets to keep the defence nuclear organisation solvent. The result being that conventional forces are much weaker than they might otherwise be. All this isn't to say that ditching the nuclear deterrent would necessarily be a better idea, but it is a conversation the UK should at least be having.
Yeah.
Hard as that conversation might be, though, there are others that will likely be harder still, not least those surrounding the country's ability to recruit the soldiers that it needs.
Oh, geez.
Recently, The Times looked into staffing levels in the British Army. What they found was that since 2010, the number of personnel has entered terminal decline. While currently hovering around 72,500, it could drop to a mere 67,741 by 2026, a far cry from the 100,000 soldiers that the UK boasted in 2009. As Professor
That's mental, that, isn't it? That's terrifying. The amount of people, I was in the Royal Marines, the amount of people that always had their notice in to leave and wanted to get out was crazy as well.
Michael Clark told War on the Rocks, there exists a, quote, threshold of strategic significance below which the army is too small to make a difference. Britain might already be on that threshold. Now, obviously, 72,500 is still a lot of people, but as we've seen in Ukraine, it's a small number in the context of a major land war. The Russian army, for example, lost about that many men in the first 6 months of fighting alone. Now let's make a comparison to one of Britain's peer nations, France. The French army currently numbers 118,600 personnel, and while Paris is also struggling with recruitment, it's nowhere near the same scale. Back in 2021, the British army reported a deficit of nearly 5,000 personnel. The French...
Imagine the French being stronger than us. Come on, Britain.
By contrast, we're only around 700 short. Interestingly, official statistics today don't record any shortages. It's not because thousands of young Brits have joined up in patriotic fervour. Rather, it's because recruitment targets were slashed in 2021 when it became clear there was no earthly way to meet them. And speaking of missed recruitment targets, other branches of the military are likewise suffering. The Guardian reports that the Navy is 5% below target staffing levels, while the RAF is 9% below. Now, these might sound like small numbers, but they do have a huge impact. To quote The Economist, the Air Force lacks the pilots and engineers needed to operate a bigger fleet of aircraft. The Navy has been forced to retire older ships from service because it lacks crew. All of this.
I do think there is room for a change around, though. I do think that the UK can turn this around and be a patriotic country again and a strong country again. It just needs to get a few things right in the government, you know? They need to actually, instead of turning around and being like, we care about mental health, they actually need to show that they do, right? Instead of being like, we take care of our veterans, they need to show that they take care of their veterans, right? All these things. Don't get me wrong. For a young person who doesn't have much opportunity in their life, joining the British military could be a fantastic thing. You're going to get life skills you've never had before, meet incredible people. But there's also a small chance that you come out worse off than you went in, right? Or not come back at all. That's another one. Although that's much less likely these days. And so it just needs to be that the odds of you coming out of the military more successful get higher. That's what it needs to be. And people need to say, oh, look, like, I want to fight for this country because I genuinely think this country cares for me. That's what you need to do.
Is a world removed from official defence planning that assumes that the UK can put a division into the field on short notice. In 2023, the House of Commons Defence Committee estimated that due to understaffing, it could instead take weeks. At this stage, we need to be clear that these poor figures are not some accident of history. In many cases, they're exactly what London claimed to want. Back in 2010, the Conservative-led coalition government embarked on an age of austerity. Among cuts to public services, then Defence Secretary Liam Fox brought in a target to reduce the size of the army from 100,000 to 82,000 by 2020, with plans to shrink it further by 2025. As recently as 2021, the cuts were again confirmed. Despite the situation in Ukraine, the plans have yet to be reversed. Another side effect of austerity was the outsourcing of military recruitment to the private sector.
I think this is the false thought that everything's fine for the rest of eternity now. There's never going to be a war in Europe. Everyone's safe. Your house is never going to be, taken over. Your city's never going to be airstriked. Like, everything's fine. That's a thing of the past. That's the thought process that led to that, right? Nothing's permanent. Nothing is permanent, and so you have to protect what you've got now.
Signing up new soldiers was the task of the defence establishment. Here's the Telegraph explaining how it used to work. Walk into a recruiting office anywhere across the country, and you could have a face-to-face conversation with a soldier, sailor, or airman, and be starting basic training within weeks. But with the axe of redundancy swinging, the MOD needed soldiers back in their day jobs. Recruitment was instead handed off to the outsourcing firm Capita at a cost of £1.1 billion to the British taxpayer. Since then, the military has missed its recruitment targets every single...
What? I did not know that. I walked into the careers office in Manchester, went straight up to the Royal Marines and was like, I want to join. Literally on the day of 15 and 9 months, which is the day you can join. And now it's some sort of other corporation between you and and it's cost us 1.1 billion pounds? Dollars, it might have said. Oh my God. What an absolute mess.
And the reasons are obvious. Rather than do face-to-face meetings, Capita saves money by doing recruitment via call centers. This gives a situation where prospective recruits don't meet a serving officer for months and may not begin basic training for almost a year. A 2017-2018 audit found that 47% of all applicants dropped out during this process. Despite this, Capita continues to work as the British military's recruiter. In 2022, the Conservative government extended their contract despite endless missed targets. Although the British press has singled them out in recent months, Capita alone are not the only outsourcing company failing to deliver. Other companies manage military accommodation, which is often in such a poor state that it's believed to be a big factor in the retention crisis. Defense Post reports that 46% of soldiers are dissatisfied with their homes, with widespread...
I'm surprised it's not higher than that. The grots that I were in at 4-5 Commando were an absolute mess. Absolute mess. And it was mostly because of lads pissing about, but still.
Reports of damp and mold. About a third of homes are in desperate need of repair. Add to this pay that has stagnated compared to inflation, and you can start to see why the army is suffering manpower shortages. The unspoken contract is supposed to be that soldiers take dangerous jobs that could result in death, and in return, the state looks after them and their families. At the moment, too many feel this contract has simply been broken. So that's the woeful stories of both procurement and manpower. In an ideal world, we'd now be able to leave things there, but sadly, we're not done. Because
it just literally covered exactly what I said on my little rant earlier, didn't it?
There's one other major area where the British military is falling short of expectations, and that's equipment.
I mean, yeah, we've still got pretty much the SA-80 around the board, haven't we? You know? And although it's turned into a relatively capable rifle, it's nowhere near as good as some of the other countries' rifles. Not to mention all the other equipment as well.
For a military that prides itself on being among the best, the British Army sure seems content to field a lot of outdated kit. Its 240 Challenger main battle tanks are powerful, but they all date to the 1980s and the 1990s, and while an upgraded Challenger 3 is in the pipeline, the first batch of 18 won't be delivered until late 2027. In this, the Challenger isn't unusual. The International Institute for Strategic Studies notes that the AS-90 howitzer also dates from the 90s and needs modernization, while the Army overall fields about 800 obsolete armored vehicles that were built in the 1970s. This compares badly to most peer nations. To quote the IISS, the US Army and many European armies have more modern and capable armor, including the US M2 Bradley, French VBCI, and Swedish CV-90 infantry fighting vehicles.
And we were literally just talking about the new tank that the US is getting as well, which looks like a phenomenal bit of kit.
As well as up-to-date versions of the Leopard tank and more modern artillery. Now, where warfighting is concerned, modern kit isn't just a nice-to-have, it's key to increasing your speed and maneuverability while reducing your casualties. Were war to break out between Russia and NATO tomorrow, the British armored fighting units, alongside American ones, would be far slower and far more prone to damage, reducing both nations' effectiveness. Still, at least having outdated kit is better than having no kit at all. In other branches of Britain's armed forces, decisions have been made to withdraw old platforms before their replacements even arrive. Right now, the Royal Navy is waiting on deliveries of new frigates like the Type 31, which will enter service in 2027, and the Type 28, which will be operational from 2028. But with staffing at crisis levels, two older warships, HMS Westminster and HMS Argyle, are going to be decommissioned this year to free up crew for the new arrivals. Now, you don't have to be particularly good at maths to realize that this will leave a gap of 3 to 4 years between the old ships being retired and the new ones arriving.
That's
a similar
mental.
problem is afflicting the RAF. Tranche 1 Typhoons from the 1990s were withdrawn early from service for use as spare parts, as were the country's C-130s.
They are working on a new aircraft, though, aren't they? In Britain and another country, it might be France, They're working on a brand new aircraft, a Gen 6 aircraft, so there is that, I guess.
The issue is that C-130s are pretty vital to have around in case of a major war, providing, as they do, heavy lift and transport capabilities that are just not replicated anywhere else. Even when new kit is coming down the pipeline, the orders are often too small for Europe's current security environment. Only 148 Challenger 3s will be delivered to the UK at a time when Poland is ordering over 1,000 modern main battle tanks. The order for 5 E-7 Wedgetail airborne warning and control aircraft, meanwhile, was recently reduced to 3. As with the lack of manpower, these sorts of statistics are often...
This whole video is just breaking my heart. It's breaking my heart because, again, like I said, I left the UK in 2015 and I've come back in 2024. Well, end of 2023. So it's like 9 years. And it's a shadow of itself. I was in the military. I saw what it was like between 2008 and 2012. They're the years I served, okay? And although it wasn't great and I could see the issues then, it's just seeing this video is just like... The poor management is horrific, isn't it? Absolutely horrific.
A result of deliberate decisions, often fueled by penny pinching, misreading the country's security needs, or indeed both. The E-7 Wedgetail order was reduced, for example, because dumping 2 planes saved the government 12% of the cost, even as it severely limited the number of spares the RAF would have during wartime. Tank and artillery numbers were reduced after a 2021 review said the British forces should focus instead on new tech linked to robotics, data exploitation, and AI. As then Prime Minister Boris Johnson summed up the review's findings, quote, "The old concepts of fighting big tank battles on the European landmass are over."
He actually said that, did he? Go tell that to Ukraine that we're now funding.
Of course, hindsight is 2020, and from our position in the future, we can easily see that big tank battles and artillery duels are very much a feature of modern European warfare. But while we can't blame people in 2021 for not being able to see the future, we can blame the British Ministry of Defence for not reacting to the way Putin's invasion of Ukraine changed everything.
Yeah.
Since February 2022, Poland has embarked on one of the biggest rearmament sprees in modern European history.
Tell you what, Poland is becoming a very intriguing country, isn't it? They're really looking after the people. They're taking care of the citizens. They're bolstering the military. Poland's becoming quite the powerhouse, isn't it?
Germany is slowly getting serious about military expenditure. The Nordic states of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark are forging coordinated defense plans. The UK, meanwhile, for all the aid it has donated to Kiev's war effort, is still chugging along like usual.
Yeah.
And all of that brings us to our last question. Can things be turned around? Can Britain reinvent itself as a military power capable of winning a major war?
I think it can. I think it ultimately can. I think we got the money with it. It's just the money needs to be distributed correctly, and they need to start showing, again, like I said earlier, that they care about the citizens. Because right now it just feels like you're not heard anymore. And if you do say something online that might be relatively controversial, you get labelled and you get put in prison. And that's just not on, is it? It's not on. And I know that's a completely different subject, and that's fine in itself. And that's a whole debate in itself, but it needs to know, like, the people of Britain need to know that this government genuinely cares for them. Because I guarantee you, ask anyone in Britain, do you think the government care about you? They'd be like, no, they just care about lining their own pockets. Like, that's what everyone says. No, I've not met a single person since coming back that's, especially considering it was an election year, where they were like, I know this new government's going to look after us. Not a single person. I've not met a single person that said that. Every single person I've met who's voted has said, I'm voting for such and such a person, but to be honest, I don't think it really matters. They all care about themselves. That's the exact response I get from everyone, that they just care about themselves.
And perhaps more interestingly, does it even want to? Now, at this stage, you might wonder if we're being a little harsh on Britain. After all, this is a country that still boasts some of the best special forces on Earth, enough naval capacity to back up America in the Red Sea, and enough leadership to help build the coalition of states aiding Ukraine. With all this negativity, you might wonder if we're just nitpicking here. To which we could only say, yeah, kind of guilty as charged, but the point of this video wasn't just to rubbish the UK's defense capabilities. It was to act as a wake-up call, to tell the uncomfortable side of the story that anyone who even vaguely cares about European security really needs to hear. Because while Britain may still be a significant regional power, it risks falling into obsolescence just as the danger level on the continent is rising in ways not seen since 1939. Hopefully, videos such as this can help shake the MOD out of its malaise, a malaise that thankfully is not yet terminal. In fact, turning the military...
Again, like I said earlier, I do think we can turn it around. I really do. It's just going to take time. And the worry is, does the UK have that time? Does it actually have the time to turn it around before Putin kicks off even more? I'd like to think so, because right now, the US is still part of NATO, and the US does act like it still cares to some extent about Europe. And so in that instance, yes, I do think we've got a little bit of time, but I don't think, you know how quickly the elections are in the US, are every 4 years, and as soon as one of them goes in that doesn't like NATO and takes US out of NATO, you guarantee things are going to ramp up big time.
These fortunes around might be easier than you'd first imagine. The Telegraph suggests that the first thing that needs to be done is to improve the offer made to the rank and file. That means no more accommodation, no more pay packets that fail to keep up with inflation. It means treating those who choose to serve with the sort of basic respect they deserve, like introducing retention bonuses and, you know, making personnel feel valued. At the recruitment end, it also likely means returning the process in-house with an emphasis on face-to-face meetings and a quick pipeline to basic training.
100%.
Equally important is creating a sense of urgency among politicians and in society. Poland's rearmament is so rapid because all major parties and most of the public are in agreement about the need to quickly pull together a vast army that might deter Russian aggression. In Britain, the Ukraine war still feels very far away, despite the UK being treaty-bound to help if Putin turns his attention to NATO's eastern members. An extra influx of cash, too, probably would not go amiss here. That could be from making some tough decisions about Britain's nuclear deterrent or from a general spending increase. Although either way, it would have to be linked to an overhaul of military procurement, likely an overhaul that forced the MOD to consider buying more off-the-shelf kit from reliable allies like South Korea or the US, rather than making fancy custom versions.
And the truth is, the UK is spending a lot of money on useless shit it doesn't need to spend money on. That's the truth.
Of course, all this is assuming that the UK wants to try and regain its Tier 1 status. But that's far from the only option. There are other directions that London could go. Perhaps the most interesting? Ditching its global reach to instead focus on specialization. War on the Rocks recently ran a whole essay on this idea. The basic premise is that if Britain is unwilling to invest more heavily in building up its military power, then a cheaper way to remain relevant might be to downsize some branches while beefing up the others to a level beyond that of peer nations. One example the essay gave was how Britain could invest heavily in its already well-regarded special forces, effectively creating a vast network of elite troops that could be used to support allied armies in times of war.
That makes total sense, but that is only if the US, being the biggest military country in the world, and the UK would stay allies for good. Because the moment it doesn't and the UK is left on their own, yes, we have some of the best soldiers in the world, by far, with the Special Forces in Britain, and the Royal Marines, and the Paras. And all the soldiers in the UK are genuinely good soldiers. But we'll get left behind if we haven't got that extra backup in the places that we don't specialize in.
Other potentials might be to specialize in counter-terrorism or remote warfare operations. In each case, the idea is that Britain would sacrifice its ability to fight a major war alone in return for developing a cheaper, leaner military that would only ever fight in concert with its allies. The essay imagined the UK adapting itself to work alongside America, but it could just as easily be France or Poland that provide the infantry and the sheer manpower. Of course, the downside to this is that it means the UK would have to give up its military autonomy, becoming just a part in a greater whole. But given that that is basically what NATO is all about anyway, doing so may not be as great a leap as you might imagine. As one interviewee told Bloomberg, we are getting to the point where the British Army really needs to decide what it's going to do. Is it going to be a heavy conventional warfighting force or a lighter out-of-area one? The first will require new investments and a serious overhaul of the current system. The latter will require a serious internal discussion about the UK's status in the world.
It's interesting how that's even a debate, considering how volatile the world is right now. speak to anyone in the military and they know that self-sustainability is so important. We could have the best special forces in the world, but if we haven't got vehicles from the RAF or ships from the Navy to transport you around, to move you from place to place, you haven't got artillery to help you out when you need it.
Either way, it is clear that something needs to change.
Yep.
Right now, it feels like
Big
the British
time.
military is at a turning point, a historical moment where it can either complete its austerity-era drive toward downsizing and reliance on new technologies, or reverse course and start bulking back up, bringing in new recruits and spending lavishly on new kit in an attempt to regain Tier 1 status.
Yeah.
Let's be clear, we're not advocating for either approach here. Both will involve trade-offs, and both come with advantages and disadvantages. What we are saying, though, is that something needs to change. Because for all of its undoubted skill, for all of the bravery of those who serve within its ranks, the British military today is in danger of becoming a shell of its former self. If politicians don't act soon, then they risk sleepwalking into a world where the UK could lose a major war. And such a world just doesn't bear thinking about.
What a great video. War Old Graphics. I will leave a link down below to the original video. Make sure you go over there. I've not seen this channel before. Let me pull up their channel.
It was the war.
It's always kind of nerve-wracking when you watch a new channel before, so you also don't know how they're going to react. But it looks like they've got a lot of different really good informational videos. And so, yeah, check them out. Link down below. You should go and check them out. Really important that you do that. I think they've got a valid point in that video. I think that the UK is a shadow of what it used to be. I really hope it can turn itself around. I really do. Let's get our little mini SA-80s out, right? And let's get this country back to the way it was. It's a cool little SA-80, this, isn't it? I got it from a little action figure Royal Marine that I've got. Anyway, great video. Let me know what you think down below in the comments section. I'd love to know your thoughts and your opinions on this from both people in the UK and people outside of the UK as well. Let me know what you think. Until next time, I love you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.